If you're wondering, that music is a group called Calexico, well known here in the Southwest. Maybe you need to stock up on some good music like that. Music help us through some tough times that George and Clif, our guests tonight, say are coming. We've been talking about some very practical matters about survival and the economy and war and things of that sort, but the staples of this program have often been things more exotic, like ETs, and they fit into this scenario. I'm not exactly sure how, but we're going to get into that as soon as we come back from this short break on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking with George and Clif about some dire predictions that are on the table here coming our way. When I began this program, fellas, I don't know how often you tune in, but we often talk about ETs in various scenarios, and one of the things that's been discussed for many years is the possibility of some sort of a staged event. I don't know. Do you subscribe to the idea that ETs are real, that they may play a role in some of this stuff that is coming down the pipe?
You first, George?
Oh, no, you can go first, Clif.
Okay. As far as I'm concerned on this one, it's quite clear that there's a reality behind the constructs that are being presented to us. There's much in the way of disinformation, so we're necessarily in a very gray area, but it's quite clear that there's something outside of the human realm that is driving the powers that be.
Meaning that an agenda is being set by someone else?
Or by their fear of someone else, however you want to put it. The same thing would accomplish it if the powers that be knew of or even had a greater extent of the knowledge around an alien threat than we do, or perceived threat, then it would motivate them to move in particular ways, and we're seeing the effects of that.
George, let me be a little bit more direct if I can. We've got some stuff in the model space about, you don't mind if I talk about the disappearances?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, we've got stuff that goes to the idea of disappearances beginning next year, and it isn't disappearances like Christian rapture disappearances. It's disappearances like linguistically, it would go to the idea of almost like interdimensional door opens up and you get thrown in the stew pot kind of stuff.
No, let's be real crisp about it. Okay, let's use the appropriate language. George got so far there. It is as though an interdimensional door opens up. Some compelling force occurs, and people are sucked through that door, and the door closes, and there's absolutely no evidence. It is as though people disappearing from between one footstep and the next.
Meaning something snatches them.
Correct, in a way in which the physical material body doesn't leave a whole lot of what we would think of as forensic clues, so concentrating on that is kind of useless because it's way beyond that level of things.
The thing about your background that's unique, George, is you did the book on the hunt for Skinwalker, and you've actually been around that kind of, I guess I'd call it dimensional weirdness.
Yeah, very much so, and it certainly suggests, the evidence suggests that there really is some kind of a dimensional factor at work, that other kinds of entities can come in and out at will. We obviously have not figured out how to do that. I'm wondering whether or not this 2 to 22 million figure that you're talking about is related to this.
No, the actual disappearance componentry. I shouldn't say that. I think not. The disappearance language, actually, we get a little bit more specific, and what's going to change is the big change is that not only are just regular people going to disappear, but some of the powers that be are going to disappear, along with their bodyguards. It's going to get to the point where, according to the linguistics we've got, the powers that be are going to be in a visible sense, and we have to discuss that in a minute, out and about with large troops of people around them. And it won't be because they fear terrorists.
It's because they fear whatever this is.
Correct.
And then you get, poof, they're gone.
You got it. Bodyguards and all.
Maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's going to cause some strain, though, because it's going to make them even crazier than they are now.
But you're not talking about something like an intervention where some other force is here to help us or save us.
We have no language to that effect. We wouldn't necessarily get intent. I deliberately stay away from trying to answer the why question because that goes to intent. And most mornings, I can barely make it beyond the intent to get coffee for myself. So trying to figure it out for someone else, I just don't want to go there.
When you talk about these kind of scenarios, we talked about disinformation. Do you suspect that there are powers that be that spread things like disinformation
we know that. It's not
that downplay the reality?
Alter the perception of it. Then again, if you try and say downplay, then you're back into the language of that's putting an intent on them that they wish to go to a particular direction, and you're making an assumption which may not be true. Many times they actually want to hype the emotional component around it, just direct it a different way.
For example, you see programs, an ABC program that aired a couple of days ago, high-profile thing. It didn't cut much new ground, but it certainly raises the awareness level.
Yeah, that probably was not the point, was to not necessarily impart any information. Anything coming over the TV anymore I consider to be more an emotional manipulation tool than an information imparting tool.
There's nothing you see where we encounter these beings on some kind of an indisputable level where, the reality. I'll explain that then.
We have indications in the language, which could be wrong and could be the result of the disinformation, and we could be being played because once it becomes known how we do things, or they can guess it, the government could do things to cause this to occur. Let's just say an interested party with enough money and supercomputing power could trick us. But we do have indications that an alien wars are coming.
Not as a staged event, an actual war.
We couldn't tell the difference. That's part of the problem. Let's talk about visibility for a second. It goes back to that terrorist solution or example we had earlier. If what we really don't get is a description of the event, really it appears that what we're getting is humans acting as psychic antenna, if you will, and they're reading the paper after the event, they're talking to their friends after the event, and we're picking up some of the language that they're using then to describe the event coming back to us now. Sort of clear? Clear as mud?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what's happening is that we get language as though we're reading the newspaper after the event. If the newspaper is wrong, we're going to get wrong information.
Or another way of thinking of it, George, is the event may or may not be real, but people are reacting as though it's real.
Well, that sort of sounds like a stage thing that we've talked about before.
But you couldn't tell the difference from our data, so we couldn't say one way or another. And it is true that humans are xenophobic. We fear those things, those creatures, including ourselves, that are different from us. The universe put this into us for a reason. There may be some good reason to harmonize with that. I personally, in a very core level of understanding, do not believe that all of the space alien, interdimensional, not from here beings are our friends, and I also think they have their own agendas that are not necessarily ours.
The good news is we don't have to worry about it until 2010, except the disappearances next year.
Yeah.
Oh, the good news.
Yeah.
Well, you wanted a cheery bit. There's plenty of time to eat pie before you're snatched by the space aliens for whatever weird agenda they got going.
So enjoy your pie while you can. Well, really, let's pursue this idea of good news. Is there a silver lining somewhere here? Some kind of light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, we don't like to deal in light. We like to deal in processes. Everything is becoming, changing, moving, etc. So there is no end of the tunnel. It's all continuous tunnel, and we just have to pay attention to where we are. And there are some very hopeful signs in the sense that the universe favors humans. We have indications that humans will be around for a long time, and it's just not necessarily good for any particular humans that happen to be living at the moment. So it depends on your view. If you're a speciesist like I am, and I think there's value to humans, and in general I like the crowd of humans, then I find it comforting that humans are favored by universe. For whatever reason, universe thinks us valuable, as do the space aliens. And it is that value that will carry forward in time.
You would categorize this other intelligence as non-human.
There's certainly that. There's no question about that. Whether or not the military or, the powers that be, Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, are out there mucking about with their own version of reverse engineering and this idea of giant holograms to convince us of a space war, whether any of that is true or not, is independent of the fact that there is the other. Within consciousness, there is a distinct other that is non-human.
You ever get a sense that there is communication with the non-human, whatever it is?
Sure, it's happening constantly. And there's a growing collective within the human population globally that is now becoming very intent and very systematically organized towards exploring and reaching into that area, and these are all the psychonauts. These are all the people that like Arrowwood or some of these other sites that report their journeys on these psychedelic substances. There's also people that are in like India and so on that India got wise to the remote viewing, and they said, CIA's doing it, why don't we do it? So they went out and they got people that do this sort of thing for their lives, which are all the yogis, and they're putting them to work. And so they're in remote viewing and in other kinds of exercises, such as exploring for the other.
One of the problems looking forward, George, is we have no idea what the words are that we're looking at. For example, in one little part of Clif's work, and I don't mean to give it all away, Clif.
That's fine. You can choose, George. We're at that time.
Yeah, I guess we are. Okay, so we're tracking at the moment something that linguistically would be called a coherer, and it's almost like a reverse engineering breakthrough kind of thing that has gotten loose and out of control of the powers that be.
Or it might be a found device, George. We just don't know.
It could be that. But our problem linguistically is we don't know what this thing is called, but it's on the loose, and the good guys have it for now.
A found device meaning ET or something from somewhere
that
else.
was left behind or came through from another dimensional, kind of a thing. Who knows? But that's just it. We get all these weird descriptions. And in fact, we had to create an entity to store all the things that are unknown and officially denied, because we kept getting juxtapositions of words, conjunctions that just did not make any kind of sense, where we could usually expect a little bit of it. And it obviously was a situation where we didn't have the context correctly described, and so therefore we're getting out of the data the best we could, and it really was hinting that we had something that was unknown and not able to be described, but nonetheless meaningful and important.
When I asked you a moment ago about communication, and you mentioned about yogis and people experimenting with psychedelic substances and things of that sort as individuals, I was wondering whether communication on an official level, like our government reaching out and trying to have a dialogue.
Yeah, that's been going on for years and years and years.
You think so?
Oh,
yeah. People have to remember that in 1952 there were literally dozens of UFOs sighted over Washington, D.C. I mean, it was in all the D.C. papers. And yet when it comes to even a suggestion that was the beginning of the real communication between our world and whatever, if you even suppose that, you're a nut job.
Yeah. They put a lot of time and effort into creating a particular mental construct which they will use to their intent, or maybe. There's a lot to suggest the powers that be are really a bunch of incompetent boobs and have got things twisted, and they've created some side effects that they were not prepared for.
Can I get an amen on that? Yeah.
And I'm just intrigued as all get out as to what this device is that is out and about in the world right now that is being chased down by the powers that be.
I'm thinking of like an obelisk like from 2001 or something.
No. Occasionally we get details that are really shocking about rather private lives, and we try not to intrude much. But, for instance, we've got one of our recent hits was about the release of the Ingrid Betancourt woman from her captivity of 6+ years. We've been tracking that for I don't know how many years through an archetype. And so it was about a very specific person. We've got all the linguistics fulfilled. It works really well. But who knew at the time that we were looking at this very specific person? We've now refined that so that because we refine between each one of the runs we do, we get a little bit better each time. We now know that we're tracking a story about two specific individuals that are whistleblowers. They have in their possession this found unit, this device, this thing that we're calling a coherer. They're actually fleeing for their lives, and they have been for a number of months at the moment, and they'll pop up into existence here and be somewhat visible over this coming winter. And by visibility, we mean hitting the global media stream in one way or another such that it will eventually feed back to us guys sitting around here reading your site or whoever's. Understand?
Yeah, I think so. I can guess who's looking for them, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
And they're in fear for their lives. Now, some interesting things about this whole deal is that when they got hold of these devices, escaped from the lab, found them in the desert, who knows? They themselves just have